The 30. Oh, it's end of financial year. How exciting. I'm sure you're all thrilled to be able to do your tax returns tomorrow, because what else are you going to do after hours in lockdown and everything else? Aaron's decided to go to the pub again, which is great. I hope you've got something at home to have a drink of or have a chew on. I've got a bottle of water. I'm loving it. James is going for the beer. Aaron's got his. Amy's gone. I had a banana before. That's great. Oh, she's got water as well. But we're here for your entertainment and your education, and just basically because we love it. As always with Twitch, if you've got questions along the way, feel free to ask anything about presenters. We are doing a triple shot tonight. It is a story in 3 parts. Act 1 is going to be James, followed by episode 2, which is Amy, and then bringing it home is this guy here. And through all of that, Aaron's going to try and keep us semi-sane along the way and heckle as much as possible. So,
does that mean I have to do the draw?
Yeah, we'll see how you go. If you can handle it, that'll be okay.
Yeah, 2 prizes to give away as usual, the JetBrains licenses. Hey, Aaron, can you think of the good questions to ask, actually?
Yeah, I'll have to pay attention to the talks then.
This is the point.
That is the idea.
Yeah,
and
so
they have to be good questions, right?
Yeah,
okay. All right, so
quality questions at the end for 2 JetBrain license giveaway, which give you access to any of the products.
And so, as always, we do say thank you to JetBrains for sponsoring us after all these years. And I think a bunch of the user groups already basically using those free licenses for their own day-to-day development for years now, which is great. James, do you want to kick us off?
All right, so let me just share my screen, which will be a little weird for a second. Let's see. Here we go.
Oh, look at that. We can see ourselves, and it's all yours.
Excellent. So you can see my screen, because now I can't see what I'm sending anymore.
No, we can't see anything at all.
All right,
no, we're good.
So I've got 2 things to show you all today. The first one is the microservice in Rust deploying on Kubernetes on Google Cloud. And the second one is the COVID-19 tracker. And we'll start with, you can guess, the microservice in Rust from it being up here. So just to let you know, I'm not a Rust expert by any means, or particularly experienced with Google Cloud. I chose these actually because they're things that I don't usually work on. So it was a chance to dig into them a bit. And some friends were telling me how interesting and awesome Rust was, so I thought I'd give it a go. So what I'm going to show you is not a Hello World service, because I thought that there was really enough Hello World services in the world. So instead, I decided to write a very much more useful service. And it's a microservice, of course. So it's so useful because it does times tables. So I've got 2 kids in primary school, and we've been working hard on times tables. So it was in the top of my mind, and I thought that was a perfect sort of size for a microservice. So that's what I ended up building. So let me give you a quick look through. So this is the main Rust file, and you can see at the top we say errors as warnings, basically, and that's what that bit does. And then we go into these crates. Now, crates are packages, so whatever your favorite environment is, like gems or NPM packages or NuGet packages, same sort of deal, but they're called crates in the Rust world. So we've got Hyper, which is a web server, URL, and a logger. Now, I'll just show you the cargo file, which is the bit that gives you the crates. So you just say your dependencies, you say the exact versions. Rust is very exact. You'll see this more in the code. So it's so exact, in fact, that you say exactly which classes you want to pull in. You don't just pull in like a whole chunk of stuff, because it tries to be very efficient. It puts a bit more effort, or it requires a bit more effort by the developer to specify exactly what they're going to use. And in my microservice, this isn't too hard because I don't use that many things. Just the web server and hash map, basically. So we've got function main. You can guess that's the entry point here. And we start a logger. But now it starts to get a bit different from other languages. So we're going to have a port number, and that's where the microservice is going to run. And by default, it's 8080, sorry. But we have to say that this is mutable, because if you don't say mutable, it's a read-only, immutable by default. Now, rather than having exceptions, the way it handles sort of parsing and other things that may or may not work is with this sort of OK and error closures. So we're basically saying, look in the environment for something called port, and if we find it, then great, we go on and we parse it as an unsigned int 16. And if that works, we finally set the port to the number that someone put in the environment. Otherwise, if it was an error, we basically do nothing and we just roll with the default 8080. So it's a bit of a different setup from exceptions or sort of if else, but kind of neat in a way, though I haven't made use of the errors in these ones. Now, the address, that's just localhost, and we have to say into in the end to get it coerced to the right type. So Rust is really strongly typed, and it works out lots of stuff at compile time, but you can use let because it works out with type inference what the type's going to be, at least a lot of the time. So in this case, right, we haven't said what the address type is, but it will work it out. But if we weren't using it later, then you'd have to specify what the type was. So we come to the service itself. Now, again, this has got a little closure, but we're passing it into a service function or a K function, which is going to turn our closure into the right type to be a service. So basically, step by step, we go through and get the parameters. Then we get the table parameter out of that. So that's which times table we're after, like 5 times or 10 times or 7 times or 8 times. And then we generate the text to send in the response. And down here, we actually bind up the server, tell it to serve, and then we print out listening on localhost, etc., and run the server. With the exclamation mark means that it's a macro, so it's stuff that happens at compile time rather than at runtime. So let me just show you this running first, so you can see what we're doing here. I'll get rid of that file. So we'll do a build, so cargo build, and then we'll run the thing. So it was really quick because we haven't changed the code, but Rust builds kind of slowly compared with other things. And when you do a cargo build, it pulls down all of your dependencies as well, so it's kind of handy. All right, let's find ourselves a browser, and we'll just have a look at localhost. All right, whoops, not that one. Port 8080. All right, so here's times tables, and by default, we're getting the ones times table. Not very hard. All right, so let's try a different times table. You can see, can you feel that Rust performance there? Wow, isn't it amazing? The memory management, the speed, the efficiency. All right, I don't think it really matters.
Really awesome.
Can you feel how fast it is? Look at me holding down refresh. Look how fast that is.
It's amazeballs.
Wow, you couldn't do that.
It's so web scale.
It totally is. That's why I chose it, because I was worried this service was just going to get too much traffic, especially on localhost. Here we go. So that's what it does, and you can, like you can see, you can change to the 8 times table. It's pretty good. So what was I going to show you next? Oh, I'll just show you the rest of the code. So the actual text for the times table, again, we need something that's mutable. So generate the times table, and you have to specify the return type, which is a string, and what it needs, which is unsigned int. So that's, you know, the 5 times table. So another macro to format it up. This is like how you do the interpolation with curlies. And I've made myself a vector. Again, this is like a little macro that turns this into the vector type. Maybe if I knew more Rust, I could have done some sort of like dot range, but this was what I came up with to make my 1 to 12 times. And then we've got a loop here where we just push it into our mutable string and say, oh, look, x by y equals the actual, here's the meat of the program. This is the secret sauce here, the t by the table that gives you the answers that you can see down here. All right, and then you return it. Now, while we're poking around here, something interesting. See this this ampersand? Well, in Rust, rather than having a garbage collector, you in fact have kind of ownership of variables. So if you just pass a variable into another function without ampersand, you don't have it anymore in the calling function. It's gone into the next function, and it's got ownership, and then it's gone from the first function. So the ampersand passes it by reference. So that means we still hang on to it in the calling function, but otherwise it would actually be gone. So the memory management is quite different. It doesn't have to like go through and see who's using it anymore, because you're very explicit on who owns it, and I mean which function owns it, which class owns it, and who's using it.
So would you say that's a little bit more advanced? Oh, so like a step up, sorry, from like the low level management you might have in C and C++ with working with pointers, but not quite like a .NET or like JavaScript memory management.
Yeah, so it's definitely aiming to cut down on all the sort of null pointers and memory bloat and that sort of thing, and dangers you have in C++. But it's not as like convenient as a managed language in a way. Like you have to think about it more. I suppose once you get used to it, then it's fine. But as someone who's used to having a garbage collector around to help you out, you really have to pay attention to it. All right, so if we go on, I'll show you these quickly. So it seemed a bit harder to like get parameters than I was expecting. I had to get a little help from the internet to write this. So Hyper's the web server, so that's built in when we build it. So we're going to get a URI from it, and then we're going to turn that into a hash map. So it's strongly typed, so hash map key value, both strings, and then we map across, and we have to parse it and collect it. And this unwrap or else handles nulls and gives you an empty hash map instead. So then finally we've got a hash map of the parameters, because we just started with a URL string, and then we go ahead and get the table parameter from that. So we're doing the same thing as we're doing in like the 8080 at the start. We've got a default value of 1, and then we're going to see whether we can get ourselves a table parameter. Again, we're using the ampersand for this, and if it's sum, so it's not null, then we try and parse it in and set it to whatever the parameter was. But if there was any errors in parsing or it wasn't there, then we just stick with the default that's 1. So that's the whole 79 lines of the microservice. And it's kind of neat that we've got the web server built in, and it's all quite small and goes to one binary and all that sort of stuff too. So that's it running over here, doing its thing. But now we want to go and put in Docker, because we're going to aim to put in Kubernetes. So first step, let's Dockerize it. So I'll just kill it here first. I'll prove you that it's dead. Look, definitely dead. Okay, so we're going to do a Docker build. I'll show you the Docker file while it's building. Right, so Docker file, it's pretty simple. So we just get the default image, copy the code across, and then we do a release build. So this cargo install does a release build rather than a debug build that we were doing before on the local host. And then it just runs hello Rust, which is the executable that we're building. So we've got the Docker already built. It was pretty quick. And now if we want to run it, here we go. So we're doing it on port 8080, and it should work just like the local one. Oh, look, did you feel any performance decrease? Now it's not quite native anymore. Oh, still seems pretty fast to me. Right. It's weird when you can't hear your audience.
You didn't do any load testing on that and performance testing?
Oh, it's just Rust, man. It'll be fine. Let's go.
And it'll be secure. Don't forget, it'll be secure and fast.
Well, it's in a Docker container. How can't it? Has to be secure.
It's going to be more secure because I put it in Docker now, so it's got to be secure and faster as well. Oh, sorry, we didn't even get to Kubernetes yet. Then it's going to definitely be web scale. So we've got it running on localhost. We've got it running on Docker now. And if we want to stop that, then we need to do a Docker PS over here and Docker kill. So you can see 57 seconds. I'm not trying to trick you. It really is running there. And then we'll kill it off. So it's ended over here, and it's ended. All right, so we've got a microservice. It's been Dockerized. Now, the next step is to go into Kubernetes. Now, using the Google Cloud engine takes a little time. So I'll just set a couple of things running, and then we'll talk about it. So first of all, we'll submit the build. Let's do that one in this tab. Right, so that's starting up. And the other thing I'll do is spin up our cluster in the other tab. Right, so these two commands, this first one here is basically the same as the Docker build, but it also pushes it to the container registry inside of this Google Cloud project. So it does the two, it takes a little while, as you can see. So it's starting with the Docker stuff, and then you'll see the actual build happen inside. And then the other command, here we go, it's got to the build. So it's starting to pull down the crates and build them. So you give it a sec. You should see it's starting to spew out all the names of the crates soon. All right, maybe we'll go to the other command and check back on that one. All right, so this one over here is making ourselves a cluster, which is going to host our Kubernetes. So we're going to make it with just one node. Despite all this talk of web scale, we don't really need more than one node for the demo.
Are you sure? I mean, it's pretty hectic.
Ooh, tempting. I haven't tried it with more nodes, actually. It might not work. So the promise is it should, right? So enable basic auth, client certificate. None of these really matter too much for our little example here, but we've got the same name throughout it. Now, this takes a little while, so I'll have a look back to the other one, whether we've got anything exciting happening. Okay, so it's busy compiling all this stuff. While we're waiting for the big iron infrastructure to do its stuff, let's have a look in the console. So I'm quite familiar with the AWS one, but the Google one is actually kind of easier to use in some ways because it's got quite a nice search that really works. Maybe not that surprising from Google, but if you look for the containers, for example, look at the container registry, you can see this one. This is the one that we're building, but this was me messing around 6 hours ago when I was testing out this morning. But we'll get a new one here, which will be marked as the latest. So this is the image that we're going to deploy later, and the new one's being built, as you can see with the red text on the left. So we'll have 2 of these soon. Other stuff you can look at here. Oh, I've got a free trial. It's quite a generous free trial, I presume, because Google Cloud wants you to come on board. You get, what is it, like $400 and something, something like that, free trial. So it's plenty to mess around in. Where is it? Yeah, 426 left out of 431. So, and you get almost a year, I think. So they make it quite easy to try it out. Other things here. So let's go have a look back at the Kubernetes engine again. I'll have a look at our clusters and see whether our new cluster's ready. So here it is. Okay, so it's 3.75 gigabytes, 1 CPU. It's got this cool little connect where you get a little shell in and you can run cloud commands and stuff, but we can't do it yet because the cluster's still getting set up. Let's see, so 83%, we're getting close. Is there anything interesting to see here? Let's have a look. It's all internal IPs, I think, at this point. All right, so our cluster's finished, I think. Okay, so we've got a cluster now. We still don't quite have an image that's still building. So while we're waiting for the build to finish, I'll just double check the commands finished over here. Okay, so that's all good. It says that our new cluster is running. Our thing's building still over here. So meanwhile, let's have a look what we're going to do next, which is going to be the deployment. So we've got a little YAML file that we're going to run, and it doesn't have too much to it. So it's only got one replica, not really web scale, and it's the Hello Rust app. It's going to get the latest version of the image here, and we're going to run it on port 8080. So there's not too much to it. Let's see. Getting very close now. On the left, you can see that it's finished the build. So it's just finishing the Dockery bits. Pushing it up. I'll go ready with the next command. So we're going to run that, apply that YAML deployment file that I showed you. And this is async, so it should run fairly quickly. Yep, but it actually isn't finished yet. The other thing we're going to do, since both of them take a while, is run the service YAML, and this one sets up a load balancer in front too. All right, so I'll show you that file too, the service YAML. The service YAML. So this one makes a load balancer on port 80 and pulls from port 8080. So nothing too special there, but we need it to get a public IP address. Now, like I said, both of these are async. So if we want to find out what's going on, we can have a look at our pods. All right, ready 0 out of 1. So that's not going to do much for us yet. And we can have a look at the services too and see how our load balance is going. Right, still pending. So we've got to wait patiently for a little bit longer. Right, I'm going to have a drink of beer. This is going to be another 10 seconds or so. Oh, look, we've got an external IP now for the load balancer. Let's have a look at the pods. Okay, I think we're ready to go. So we'll take that external IP and stick it in our browser, and I have a feeling it might work. Let's see. Here we are. Notice it's on port 80. I mean port 80 now, so no 8080 anymore, and got the same great features as before. You can specify your times table. You can specify not only the common garden variety ones, but like 25 times, 28 times, etc. Anything you want, and check out that web scale Kubernetes speed backed by Rust.
You need to throw Maxent into it and see what it does.
Yeah, well, actually, because it's just unsigned in 16, if you put something really big in here, I think it'll actually not parse and it'll go back to 1. Yeah, here you go.
Oh,
look at that
error handling.
Look at that. Oh, okay. So I think you've seen enough of this service now. If anyone wants to talk to me about commercializing it later, potentially buying the rights for it, then just hit me up later. Richard, you keen?
I'll have my people to talk to your people, and we'll get the lawyers involved. It'll be fun for all.
That sounds good. Probably be a year or 2 of negotiation.
It's not the worst startup idea I've seen.
Oh, thanks. So that's any questions. Actually, maybe we'll pause there and see any questions. So that's all the stuff I had to show you on the Rust and microservice. Has anyone got any questions?
Yes, there's been a couple of questions come in. I can't do it because I don't think I'm admin enough, but there's a way that you can make the questions appear up on screen.
Yeah, James has got control. But
yeah.
If you just tell me which ones, maybe you can represent our audience.
Yeah, so there was a question about how big is the Rust runtime for your Hello World application?
Right, you mean for the compiled binary, or?
Yeah. So the thing that's output that you run, how big is that?
All right, let's have a look. Right, 2.8 megabytes, including the web server.
Well, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I was looking at my phone to clean up some space and realized that most of the phone apps were like 80 megs or so, which seemed insane for a little app that barely did anything. But there you go. They should have been written in Rust, clearly.
Exactly. So there was another question around the performance. I know that having a bit of a joke about the web scale performance of Rust and things like that, but a lot of people do tout that it is a super performant language relative to a lot of other languages. Do you have anywhere that we could go to learn more about the performance characteristics and the sort of optimization scenarios for it?
So I haven't really looked into that side of things too much. I read some stuff saying we had this XYZ app that we were having performance problems with, written in language, whatever. And then we switched over to Rust, and even before optimizing it, it was 100 times faster. And we optimized, and it was 500 times faster. But that's about as far as I've seen.
Okay.
No real data on that, just hearsay.
just hitting F5 a lot in the browser and seeing that it was, it was snappy.
It does actually feel quite snappy for
that was just caching though, right?
But
Yeah,
it has no database or anything, mind you, or rendering or anything like that, or framework. But yeah, I haven't looked into the performance at all.
Okay. So next question. So obviously it was a bit slow to do the build and deploy that time. If you were to do it again, like the next build and deploy, will that be faster, or is the time taken because the infrastructure had to stand up?
So the bit starting the cluster you wouldn't have to do again, but the build I think you would have to do. Maybe there's some shortcut. I'm no expert on it, but for me messing around, I had to run that each time. I think you probably need to, unless you can push, maybe you can push your Docker container or something and skip some of it, but it seems like it's fairly slow to get a new image up there.
And last question at the moment is, did you look into whether there are any Rust web frameworks like ASP.NET MVC and Rails, etc.?
Oh, you mean for doing this project?
Oh, just in general, have you come across any Rust web frameworks?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't looked into it actually. For my little microservice, it was enough just to use the built-in web server.
Cool. I think that's all the questions that we've got for the moment. On to the next speaker.
Oh no, that's still me.
Wait.
Wait.
James wants to hog the limelight. He's got 2 talks.
Oh, yeah. Does he? I should have read the run sheet. Whoops.
Yeah, we should have actually put a run sheet together.
Yeah, it is up on here. Here you go. It's very professional. Kind of.
That's okay. Mine's a small talk, so I can bring us back up to time after James just uses up all of the time for himself.
Yeah. Oh, really? My next one's only a couple of minutes, so it was only kind of an addendum because we weren't really sure how many speakers we were going to have. So,
it doesn't change my comment on the fact that we can bring on the next victim, which just so happens to be you.
Yeah, I'll just go and then come back again.
Apparently, you're not that bad, Aaron. He's come back for more.
Let's see. Who wouldn't? All right. So since COVID-19 is in everyone's minds these days, it was definitely in mine, especially when there was more cases in New South Wales. So I found this website that gets updated pretty early in the morning every day by New South Wales Health. So it's got good data and it shows you where the cases are, but it doesn't give you a very good view of them. It gives you a view of the current time, and the data's there for getting previous times as well with this slider. But it's quite hard to work out how recently you actually had cases because these flyovers don't change with the date here. You get the change in colors in the map. Basically, data's there behind the scenes, but if you want to know how recently there was a case in your area, it's really hard to tell from this map. So I thought, well, I want to know how recently in my postcode or nearby postcodes there was a new case of coronavirus. So I thought, well, data's there. Let's pull out the old inspector. So I went to the network, reloaded the page as you do.
Can you just bump the font size on the inspector? Maybe make yourself full screen again.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about this?
That's better, thanks.
Yeah, so you don't really need to see the top part. So there's a pile of different things which are kind of interesting to poke through briefly, like population information. But the one that we really want is data cases. So it gives us for all postcodes, and it's actually organized by day, I think. Yeah, you've got the number of cases, deaths, date, etc. So this was the information that I wanted, but I wanted it in a different form. So I could tell basically, was there a case in my area yesterday, or was it like 28 days ago? Because that's all you could tell on the map. And 28 days ago, I mean, not so much of a worry. Yesterday, new case, yes, much more of a worry. So let's grab this URL, copy link address, and we'll go back to our friend the terminal over here. I think I've got an even bigger one. No, we'll use this one. All right. So we'll just curl it and see what we get. Oh, look, we get lots of JSON, but no new lines, which is a shame. So what I thought was we needed some new lines to work with it. So, I mean, you could parse it as JSON and do some other stuff if you wanted to, but I was just doing a quick one-liner. So I didn't bother with that. I just split it per new line. So I used Ruby to do it because often I program in Ruby, and that was just the easiest way to do it. But I just want to basically get every curly bracket comma and turn it into a curly bracket comma with a new line at the end. So I'll paste that in here. So the Ruby just reads standard in, runs this regex on it, which is a very simple regex, gets the old version and replace it with the same thing with the new line. So now we get a nice list of all the cases, one per line, and then you just stick grep on the end to find the ones in your particular postcode. Now, if we have a look at the map, you could, I mean, in this case, we'll get rid of the inspector, you could use your personal postcode, but in my postcode, thankfully, there's nothing going on at the moment. But if we have a look at Lane Cove, you might recall that recently there was a case there in a school. If we look at postcode 2066, so we just grep 2066, and we can see that cases were 18, 18, 18, 18, and then suddenly they changed to 19 on the 24th of June. So from this little one-liner, you can run in your console, it was only a few days ago in Lane Cove that there was a new case. This censored came in later. I don't know what it means. The other ones are fairly self-explanatory. But the main number I've been looking at is the cases change over a particular date. So Lane Cove, right, you can see something happen. Whereas if you look at the map, you've got something which is the same yellowy color. If we look at Rose Bay over here, which is 2029. The cases for the last 14 days have actually stayed at 11. So you could be less concerned if you're in that postcode. There was something like even before 14 days ago where there was a case, but it wasn't recent. Whereas if you're looking at the 2029 postcode, then it was recent. So this is basically just what the one-liner does. You just stick your postcode on the end of it and you can run this. Hopefully we don't have more cases around in New South Wales, but if we do, then this would be a good way to just keep track how close they are to your ISO area. All right, so any questions on that one?
Can you chuck the address for the site into the chat? Those ratio would like to go and poke in the data.
Oh, okay. You mean the web address?
Yeah.
Of the let's find the original one. This one.
Not of your timetables app. We've already started hacking that one.
Well, that's just localhost.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, it is on Kubernetes. Okay.
Unless the NBN is down, you should be able to access it.
Here you go. So this is the raw starting point, and I mean, for free, I'll even give you my one-liner. That's how nice I am. All right, and there you go. So
yeah,
I mean,
you could write a Rust app that you deploy to Kubernetes on GCP that parses the query string for the postcode and then returns you the data. But then you would have to work out how to call Ruby from Rust to be able to do the character replacement so that you get the new lines.
This is, I mean, this seems like serverless is the way to go.
Well, no, yeah. So you'd have one of the microservices be running Ruby.
Yeah. Good idea to do the regular expression. Yeah.
This just reinforces why I just want to stick with the front end.
Well, the terminal's my front end for this one. We could run this under Windows, maybe under the Windows subsystem for Linux, which Amy's going to tell us about soon, in case you don't happen to have that. Generally into the next talk.
Yeah, Jay Tango has suggested that you could use the data that's coming back and feed that into your multiplications table, so you can get the multiplications of the postcode cases. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant, JT.
Yeah. That's really good to predict how it's going to go with sub-exponential multiplication. Very good. All right. Were there any other questions?
I was gonna say then you just put some CSS grid on the front and it looks pretty, and then Amy's gonna be happy then.
And then,
that will make me happy. Yes.
all right, I'll hand over to Amy then. You ready to have your screen up, Amy?
Yep. Gotta work out which screen it is. Yeah.
Sweet.
Okay, I think that's it.
And
Cool. Actually, now because we're doing a demo, I'm going to take advantage of using Windows Terminal to increase the font size for everything. Whoops, that's probably a bit much. Cool. Okay. Is that a bit better? Okay, so WSL. I am by no means an expert. I have been using WSL since when was build? Since the first day of build, because there'd been a lot of talk about it. It was coming out fairly soon. And I was giving a talk on day 2 of build. So obviously day 1 seemed like the best day to go through and completely change my terminal setup and do something completely different right before giving a presentation. So I decided to test out WSL2 then. And of course, yesterday, the day before this presentation, I decided to actually get around to setting things up properly so that I could have it set up in this demonstration. So here I have my WSL2 terminal running in Windows Terminal, and just for interest's sake, I have my task manager over here on the side. And if we have a look, if we sort by memory, there's this little process up the top here, which is using a decent amount of memory, which I found out is what runs WSL. So we're just gonna see how it goes. So the main differences between WSL and WSL2, if you have used the first version, is the way I explain it, which I'm sure Aaron will correct me if it's wrong, is WSL1 was kind of Linux on Windows, whereas WSL2 is Linux. So this works a lot better if we're actually using the Linux file system. So I had to move all of my stuff over directly into the Linux file system rather than using the Windows file system. And although technically WSL2 is faster and uses more memory on startup, there is some use cases where that is not the case. So the good thing is you can run WSL2 and WSL1 at the same time. So this is WSL2, and then I'm also running WSL1 at the same time, which you can see is completely different. I was going to see if I could try out that command, but I'm not sure I have Ruby installed. So haven't gotten around to doing that. Just having a look. So if anybody is interested, my setup is mostly here in this blog post for setting up Windows Computer for Dev, and it goes through a lot of the things I use in WSL. And I also used this blog post by some weird guy who works at Microsoft. Not sure if you're familiar with him. So have a look at those 2 blog posts. Now I'm going to try and test out my task manager at the moment. One of the really awesome things about WSL2 is we're able to open GUI applications through the terminal. The URL for my blog. Aaron, do you have access to the chat for that?
Yep, I can post that.
Yeah.
And I'll post the proper blog post as well.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got my terminal currently set up using ZSH. So it's got all the various different things in here. I can also take advantage, because this is WSL, it's really easy to take advantage of using bash aliases and various different things. For example, an alias that I set up today is main branch, which is a function that I can run, which will create a new branch for me, delete the previous main branch, which I'm no longer using, and then push the new main branch up to GitHub so that I can switch that one over. So super easy to sort these out with bash functions. And if I actually open it, and bash functions able to set these up the same way you would normally do in a terminal. But what I'm actually wanting to do here is we're going to set up to run a GUI application through WSL. So here I'm also going to run tmux, which I have set up, which is a terminal multiplexer. And then if I can remember the keyboard shortcut, nailed it. Oh, great. I've forgotten how to switch.
Control B and then arrows.
Excellent. Thank you, Aaron. So here, using tmux, I can run in 2 goes. So I can start my site. So that's starting. And then I can go through and run. Then I can go through and run a script. I have to run Cypress, which is a UI testing tool that I use. And yay, it's worked even faster this time. So previously in the past, anytime I was trying to do something in WSL, I would have to sort of hack around and find, I've got throughout my blog posts, I've got all of these little, if you're using WSL, here is this little workaround and tip and weird thing that you've got to do. But using WSL2, these things just work automatically, didn't have to sort it out. There's a couple of things that you have to do to get the GUI stuff working. You need to install something similar to, I'm using Xserver for mine, which allows you to open them from WSL. And there's a really great blog post, which I'll also get put in the chat, on setting that up so that we can open things up through the GUI applications. So I can go through and do this. There's still a couple of things that are really hard to do. For example, it's currently only running Electron. I'm still working out how to actually get access to the other browsers on my computer through here. So at the moment, it's only got like Electron installed in the Linux side of things. So that's all I have available for testing, but I can go through and run my testing through all of this. There's also a lot of other testing things. Any testing using Puppeteer previously needed to have a workaround to let WSL know where the Windows version of your browser was, but now that just works out of the box, which is super awesome. Okay, I'm checking. I feel like the memory is just not, I feel like it's way more. I was really hoping the memory would get worse. One thing I'm going to test out. So there are still some things that WSL does not do well at. So if I start this, for example, if I run visual regression testing, and I'm starting my server, going through and setting that up and waiting for it to start. So this kind of thing is much easier to do in WSL. Wait for this to set up and watching as the memory gets higher. And then shift. Okay, so that's started. Now, if I run visual regression testing, we're going to compare this. Oh, this is going to lie to me, isn't it? Oh, come on. I tested this just before and this wasn't working, which it's still really not working, but it's working better than it was before.
I was going to say, if that's your barrier for entry for working, all those errors, then what's broken?
Well, before it wasn't doing anything. It was just, so before when I run this command it seems to have broken some things. So before when I run this command to do visual regression testing, I had this sitting for hours. To be fair, okay, I am taking 104 different screenshots of my application. And I had this sitting for hours and hours and hours, and it still didn't finish. I ended up having to cancel it because it was just taking way too long. But if I do something just on the Windows side of things, if I do stuff on the Windows side of things, it still takes a while because it is running 104 different screenshots, but this does, of course, now it's not working. It makes a liar out of me because clearly I did not sacrifice enough to the demo gods for this evening. But the comparison between WSL2 is hours. Like, I'm not kidding. It was running for at least 6 hours before I canceled it. Ran it in Windows, and it was done within 3 to 5 minutes, which was much better than I'd had previously. Somewhere in here. The last thing, which is really awesome for WSL, so we have a look here, is previously when trying to, we're going to try and do on live stuff here. Previously, when installing Ruby on a Windows machine, it is incredibly difficult to do. It takes forever, lots of mucking around, and things still don't quite work properly. But
so once you install Ruby, you can run James's command.
Yeah, that's what I thought. We'll see if we can run. We'll see if we can run the command. Which anybody who has attempted to do Ruby stuff on a Windows computer knows. Oh, there's my visual regression testing has done, has finished, and it has not worked properly. I swear I did test beforehand. I can go through and update. Something didn't work here, and I didn't actually read the messages properly.
What have you got? Let's see.
Added it.
I think your update failed. Your PPA didn't load for Ubuntu.
There should be
does not have a release file.
Is that the PPA for 2002 or whichever one you're running, or did you use an old one?
Well, no, I'm gonna have to find that one. Yes, that may be a different one. actually, no, this was how I ended up doing it last time because I discovered it was way easier to do it. So another advantage of running WSL is you can actually use Homebrew. Some things don't quite work properly. For example, anything using casks, it won't work because it's not Mac OS, but the rest of the stuff does still work, which makes things way easier to install packages. So I don't actually have to, in the past, I've had to use Chocolatey or a Windows package manager to do things, but I don't have to do any of that on this computer. I see a question in the chat. Have I tried hosting my project folders under Windows home folder versus the WSL Linux home folder? Was the build startup time any noticeably slower? That's how I originally had it. So I have a folder in my Windows folder, which is how I was using it in WSL1, and I attempted to use that same folder in WSL2. Not sure I noticed a difference in the time things took, but it wouldn't work. So all my local servers, nothing would auto reload, and there was a bug where you have to use it in the Linux terminal. So not sure about time difference, but a bunch of things didn't work. How am I going for time? Are we going to be able to run this command, or is it?
Oh shit! Was I supposed to be keeping time?
I assumed somebody was. Oh,
we had a run list and everything.
Oh.
Well, it's still installing things, so
we could
You've got 7 minutes.
I've got 7 minutes. Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure.
Richard's got to eat half a pizza.
Richard's time. Let's see. Are you at the point where this is the last thing, Amy, or?
Yes, this is the last thing. However, this has been sitting here for a while, and I'm not sure how much longer it's going to take to finish installing this.
Artist said it's fine because we don't need to take a train to get back home.
I was just going to add, while we're
to actually ramble for about an hour afterwards, so that's good.
Yeah, well, while we're killing time waiting for Homebrew to install, I was just going to add to what you mentioned about the WSL1 versus WSL2 and the mount locations. So the primary difference is there will be some performance differences. It will actually probably be faster on WSL2, but negligibly, and you'll run into a bunch of other problems. That's because WSL2 runs in a virtual machine. That's what that VM process is. It's Hyper-V running, and that's hosting a Linux kernel where WSL2 is running. Whereas on WSL1, it was actually just running on the Windows kernel directly using process interception. So when you ran WSL1, it was running on you're nearly out of hard drive space.
It's normally like that. But I like how this one, it tells me that I've got like 200 gigabytes free on my hard drive. So
yeah, which is bigger than your actual hard drive. Interesting.
Yeah.
Because WSL1 was running I guess you could almost say more natively on Windows. It was able to leverage more of the direct file system access, whereas WSL2 has to rely on the file system access via Hyper-V. That's why you don't get the file notifications on change from when you've got the files on a Windows file system across to the WSL file system. So that's why you end up with some hacks. Where you will see major performance differences are really I/O intensive things. So npm install. That's a huge amount of I/O that has to then go over a Hyper-V bridge to the Windows file system, and that's going to be slower. But the actual execution of a process once it's loaded into memory in WSL2 will be faster because then it's running a native Linux process on a native Linux kernel.
Yeah. Yeah, so that definitely the difference between, for example, if I make changes in the Linux side of things, but I have the folder open in File Explorer, it won't pick it up. I've got to refresh it to get the file changes because, yeah, it doesn't watch for those files. But yeah, one of the other advantages of WSL2 is it's super easy to mount it on as an external drive, although it does lie to you because it thinks that all of the remaining space is available. It doesn't know that there's actually Windows installed there. And I can see our VMM process is upping its memory quite a bit. It did overtake Firefox in CPU usage for a little bit there. Oh no, it is. It's neck and neck with Firefox. Giving that a run for its money. Cool. It's doing stuff. Let's see if I can just run this. Of course. Whoops. ZSH RC. Add that. Refresh. Okay. Does anybody have a preferred Ruby version? Does anybody have a preferred Ruby version that I can install?
This should run on any of them.
And I've spelled N wrong. Okay. Let's give it a go. The thing is, this script is actually no use to me, though, because I feel like it's not even going to pick up my postcode. There's no one's made a WA version of this, which
it just keeps showing 0. It's weird.
I think we've got like 3 or something at the moment. We were almost at 0 until the live export ship came in and was like 0, 0, 0, 0. We were down to 1 left, and then all of a sudden it was 25. And JT's making fun of us. Yes, JT, we got the internet, especially because we all went into lockdown. They were like, right, it is time for WA to get the internet. Otherwise, they're not going to survive.
Well, it gave you time to install the 5G towers, right?
Yeah. Yeah, like plenty of. I'm pretty sure there's one right out there. So it's really suspicious how we've got all of these 5G towers and yet so many low coronavirus cases. It's almost like there's no correlation between the two of them.
It's Bill Gates.
And it's impacting Aaron because I think he just channeled Jar Jar.
I've been watching a lot of Lego Star Wars with my kids.
Oh, come on. I thought it was doing okay, and now it's...
The US approach.
Yes.
If we don't test, we don't know, and it's all fine.
Yes. Oh, don't worry. I found out they announced today that as of the 10th of July, everybody except for Victoria can go to Queensland. So technically I can go and visit my family. However, I would have to quarantine coming back. Although Queensland will let me in, WA won't let me back. Yes.
It sounds like a lose-lose situation. Like you either end up in Queensland or you end up stuck in Queensland.
Yes. Yes, as someone has pointed out, we've got excellent CPU usage going on right here. So yes, although they do insist that WSL2 does use less memory on startup, yeah, this this is not great. So I'm going to go through and try and close down a couple of.
Failed.
Did it fail?
Or something did.
No, that was a previous thing.
Different tab.
Okay. Exit out of that.
No, we should change this over to be in Perl or something, and then it might have worked, or awk or something, rather than the one bit of Ruby.
Or just use JQ, which is the JSON parser and query tool.
It may be faster than installing all this stuff.
Despite closing all of that.
Yeah.
So
Ruby,
we turned tonight into an install fest, apparently.
Yeah. All right.
Yes.
Maybe switch to Richard and come back to Amy.
Yes, sounds like a good idea.
All right.
All right. Well, let me.
I'll stop sharing and we'll come back.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Sharing away.
Here we go.
Okay. So what I thought I'd do very quickly, since we're talking about C#9, I grabbed today's build of the previews. So Brent went to GitHub.net installer, went to the binary location, brought that down. If anything breaks, it's simply because, again, I'm living on the edge of silliness and doing things without actually checking stuff. Unusual, I know. I'm also going to just run the watcher here. So this is compiled and running. I have done a couple of things just because this is the preview build that is worth mentioning. To see and play with the C#9 language preview stuff, you need to put lang version in your project. Actually, I should also just quickly do this. .NET -- list SDKs. And let me hide that so that goes away. So this is .NET 5 Preview 8. Preview 6 got released officially last week. I can't remember what day of the week it was. I think it was Thursday or something like that, our time. Preview 6 is out, but this is the Preview 8 build, literally the latest. Enable that there, and you also, on the download page, it tells you to go and add in a thing to your NuGet config. So create a NuGet config, pop that in, and then you've got access to everything, and you can go and play with this yourself and do stuff at home. So let's start off with the basics. We're going to talk things like inits and other various things. So here's a public class. Let's call a very creative class name of C1, and we'll pop in a property. Oh, wow, look at me, my fat fingers. And we'll call this V1. Just awesome. I don't know why. V for value. Now, the thing with something like this is that if C equals C1, let's do that. New C1. With the init properties, the idea is you can do a initializer syntax like that to create an item, and then we can go into console here and we can just C.v1, pretty standard stuff, assuming I can actually type, which apparently I can't. You should see me at work. It's hilariously bad.
They don't let you code at work. We know, Richard.
There's a reason for that. And then, fairly normal stuff. But if I want to start dealing with properties that I don't want changed once the object is created, then it becomes a bit more difficult. So if I went C.v1 here and made the value 2, that's fine, no big deal. So normally we'd end up doing something like make this a private setter, and then we'd whack in a constructor, and we'd do whatever else it is we need to do, which is a bit of a pain in the butt. So instead what they said, you know what, let's actually do init properties, which is cool. So if I save that now, you can see over here, things are going to complain when I try and run this. But also this little warning comes up, says, hey, guess what? You're trying to do an init only property. You can't do that. In fact, I should have actually saved it on both sides. And it then means, compiler's going to complain. Happy days, and then we get compiler errors and all those sort of things as you would expect. So really nice way of doing things. In terms of how it works as well, things like inheritance and so forth, I can still do public class child or something like that, complete with incorrect casing, and say this is a subclass of C1, put in here an actual constructor for this guy and call this child, leave that. And if I do base.v1 equals 2, for example, that's perfectly fine. So the compiler picks that up for you. But if I did public method m, or public void, thank you, Richard, m, often talk to myself like this at work as well. It's really upsetting for people that, suffer. Based on v1 equals 3 or something like that, it's going to complain here in the same way. So init properties are really nice. Compiler does that strong checking to make sure that you're only ever changing the value on initialization, and after that, no other changes allowed. It's cool. So that coming in itself is a nice improvement into C#9. Where this gets more interesting, though, is that init properties mean that you can really start creating DTOs that are effectively, or just objects in general, that you can initialize once with all the values, and then they're effectively immutable after that. So this is where then records come in. Now, you would have seen, if you looked at some of the posts around build time, that there was this idea of a data class. That syntax is gone now. It's actually record. So record is now what we have, which is cool. And if I compile all that, actually compile both sides, and we get the run going, then it's going to do its thing. You can see down the bottom, everything's working again. Records are just classes under the hood, but they're treated slightly differently. So I can do something like this. I can go B, for want of a silly name, equals C. Now, at that point, that's just normal assignment, no big deal. But if I do this, the with keyword, which is special for records, I can then say v2, v1. Actually, let's do this. I'm going to add an extra property over here. Prop int v2, init, that one as well. v2 equals 4. Very, very awesome code. What this line here does is basically take a copy. When you declare a record, there's internally a method gets generated that allows objects to be copied, and then gets used in the with statement. So effectively, this is making a copy of object C, and then changing the value accordingly of the second one. So if I did change this slightly here, and we go something like, and shout out questions if they're coming through, because I can't see them with what I'm doing. C.v2 here, and D.v2, like so. D, no, not D, B. Jeez. And then save that and run it. You'll see that things get, hopefully, fingers crossed, updated accordingly. Kind of cool, very useful. And the language designers, when
question about record. Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question.
Yep.
Are properties reference copied, or are they deep copied between record types? So if I had, two and they're both like pointing to an array, like if there's an array property or something like that, like would the array be the same across both records?
So it's going to be based on whatever the type of the object is. So for example, if I did something like that, for example, where it was a reference to class X and I had another prop that was record Y, for example, that would be a reference copy. That becomes a deep value.
Damn, I was hoping you wouldn't know the answer.
All right. Well, in that case, that's a deep value, and that's just not valid syntax.
No, I didn't actually know the answer. I was like, I was just like, I wonder how that works.
Well, and for amusement factor, you can actually, I'll come back to it in a second, actually. So just in terms of doing this, you can imagine this is a fair bit to type each time, when really what we can do is we can go, you know what, we don't need to do any of that. We're going to change those curlies to brackets. We're going to drop the publics, and we're going to go get rid of that as well. We'll just literally have that. We'll put a semicolon to say there's no body. And then, because now we're changing this, what this is going to do automatically with the compiler is create the init properties. It will create a constructor. We'll create the copy method. It will also create a destructor. And then I can change this because it's dropped things out and it's going, you know what? It's just a record. You don't need to use initialization syntax. You can literally just call the constructor. And I've now got code that can be as simple as that. So that will then do its same thing, like so, which is cool. It starts making this C# code much, much simpler. What I was going to say before as well is that I can actually do this as well. So you've got C2, and I might have int v1, int v2, int v3, and that's subclasses C1. I can have even something like this, v2 and v1, which is cool. Now, the compiler will have a bit of a whinge about that because it's a preview, but what it does mean is I can do something a little bit weirder like this, where I go var x equals new C2, 1, 2, 3. And then we will come down here and let's do a few things. So what values did I switch around, v1 and v2? So we'll do x dot v1, value 1, and we'll cast this to c1, like so. Kind of ugly, but you get the idea, hopefully. And now we should see the values switching around, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Come on, anytime now. There we go. So it's subclassing. I can do the casting and everything else, and it's actually handling the value switching as well. It's a little bit funky how that behaves if you think about it. It's not a direct call. It's kind of a constructor that calls the base constructor with the subclassing happening and a whole bunch of other different approaches to it. But because there's classes, you've got inheritance. Because there's classes, you can actually stick on interfaces as well if you really want to. But because of the way the compiler is generating the code under the hood, the constructor call here is effectively wrapping a base call, which is doing the constructor up here and then adding its own bits on top of that. So kind of a nice approach. Interesting to see how that plays out and if that stays the case going forward. You may have also seen that when they did the preview builds, they were going to do something like this in the syntax, where basically you declare it like a field, and it would automatically generate as a record. They took that away. That was in preview 6 builds. So if you look at the current preview 6, you can probably play around with records and see some of that in place, but it got removed. I picked that up last week when mucking around. All right, a few other things just when we're talking records is value and equality checks. So let me take that back out. So C1 there is that. If I go new C1 here, 1,4 again. So those two are two completely different records. If I go do something like this, B equals C. So a reference equality check and a value quality check. All right, compile that. Wait for it to do its thing. Any second now. All right, so the value check is true and the reference check is false, which is as you would expect. So records by default in the equality comparer are now value-based. So again, the compiler's mucking around under the hood and overriding the equality checks for records and treating them as a deep value copy, value reference check, I should say. Value reference check. Wow. Deep comparison, which is really nice. So a lot of the things that you might, typically do where you are writing your own comparers and doing all those sort of things, if you've got code like that floating around, especially when you're comparing DTOs and you just go, I just wanted to do an equality check, you can do all that now, which is really nice. All right. Few other things, just as a quick run through of stuff. You'll notice, if you're paying attention, that over here in this class, I did nothing in terms of namespacing. By default, the C# compiler now will go, hang on, if there's no namespace specified in the file, it will just put it in what's called global namespace. And in terms of cleanup, I can actually go and even get a bit crazier and pretend that C# is now JavaScript. And get rid of boilerplate stuff for console applications, for example. So this now is literally a case of it's going to come in and generate that for me. It will generate an entry point. It will generate the things it needs to do in terms of the code to make it work. And I can just drop stuff in there. Now, the rules around this is you can only have one compilation unit, in other words, one file where you don't have a class defined or something like that, and where you're just literally putting methods on the page. But in terms of knocking up some simple code, becomes really easy to do that. Again, trying to just remove some of the boilerplate around those things. Few other things that are probably worth talking about as well, just while we're doing the quick run through of everything, is that in terms of saving code and saving effort, I might have something like dictionary, and we just do, say, a string and then a list of ints or something. Okay, and this is D. Now let me just actually get that in there. So using collections generic, that's cool. Normally if I go D equals new, whatever, it's going to generate the type. C# will now, geez, go away. Will now help you by going, based on the type that I'm putting the result in, it will determine what it is for me, which means I can go then something like this and really shorten up code. So I can go S is there and another, remember this is a list under here, so I can do another list of 1, 2, 3. And that's valid code. So again, it tries to make, trying to make C# terser, more, basically more direct in terms of what you're trying to do and taking out a lot of the boilerplate and the noise that we see in our code, which is always a good thing. You can also do other things like this. So if I've got an exception, that is going to be automatically a system exception because it knows that the throw method needs to have some type of exception. It generates it for me, which is kind of cool.
So it is basically just JavaScript now.
It's just JavaScript now. That's all we've got. We've turned C# into JavaScript.
You're saying that like it's a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. Well, it is. It's better than that. It's kind of more like TypeScript if you were going to say it, because obviously it's strongly typed and it's not just a dynamic mess. And we don't have to download the entire internet every time we want to install a NuGet package. But apart from that, yeah, it's very similar. There's a few other things that's probably worth mentioning. Something like this. Let's say I've got public class X, whatever, and I have a method in here that takes, let's do this, property, we'll go a function in here which takes an int, another int, and another int, and we'll call this a creative name of f. And then I have, yes, okay, fine, let's include system, that's great, thank you. Public int m, which takes in two ints, a int b, and then does some calculation with them based on whatever the function is, and we'll just return f a comma b, right? So nothing too fancy there. What I can do over here now is I can do a few things. So you recall C1 here is a record with two values in it. I can do var x comma y equals c, which is cool. I can go var, I can do f, oh my goodness, stop it. X, I call it x, f equals new. Looking funky. And then I can go f.m, f.f equals, I don't care, just return 0. And then when I do console.writeLine and I do f.m 1 x comma y and run that, oops, learn how to type x comma y, that's going to now call my method, which is cool, which calls the function, which is going to basically say, these are throwaway parameters, I don't care anymore. So I can start dropping these in lambdas. Now, we had a convention, people would do this before. If they had something, they generally do something like int whatever, but then you get to this second one and it's like, what is that? I don't know anymore, it's confusing. So it's now just part of the compiler. And as you can see, it's detecting that this is of a certain type and it's just a throwaway. You can even do silly things like this equals new x, for example. The compiler go, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. And it's picked up that the type is an x, and then it's going to throw it away in any case. So kind of a no operation. But it's interesting that this stuff is in here, and we'll make code again a little bit more terse when needed. And if you end up doing those things where you've got these other external functions that are expecting a whole bunch of parameter options and you just don't care, then you can just throw it away, which is kind of nice. The only other thing that is meant to be coming but is not here yet is null checking. So if I go to, let's just create another one, do whatever, void, doesn't really matter, M2, and this might take in a string of S, for example. We often will do code like if, being good developers, if S is null, throw new. That code there, and generally this is normally, an argument exception and whatever else. And then we do name of, oh my goodness, S, something like that. That line there where we're doing the null checks, because C#8 obviously introduced a lot of null checking and so forth, just extending that through the compiler a bit more, we should be able to do this thing where we put the exclamation mark or the bang if you're American after that variable, and the compiler will automatically generate that other line of code where if thing is null, throw an argument exception, argument null exception, and it will include the name of the parameter and everything else. So it just makes that code a little bit simpler again. So compiler trying to help you out. In terms of everything and in terms of a quick run through of C# 9, I think that's about it. So I suppose the question is, are there any questions? Do I really want to know, can I eat my pizza? And I'm going to say there are other things. There's probably been a whole bunch of heckling, so I'm actually looking. I hope there's been heckling, because that's the only way we like to play around here. Wow, there's a fair bit going on. All right, so can someone summarize some of that?
I'm just winding up people on the .NET team, or in some of my colleagues from Microsoft that are on the line.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, Dave's on the line, so I was just telling him how F# is still a superior language.
Oh, geez, really? One thing I will say with records, I don't know yet how it's going to play with Entity Framework. I would assume it'll be okay, because EF, when it tries to instantiate an object, when it's bringing it back out of persistence, will look for the constructor and try and populate it based on the constructor. But there might be some differences around how it does things with collections and nested records, I suppose, if you're doing something like that. And again, thinking about the fact that records are init only. Once you've brought something out of EF, you probably really want to use records for no tracking queries, because you're not going to be able to change those things. So you can't, bring the record back as a tracked entity and then change it. So why pay for the overhead? All right, what do we got? How do you can you declare a variable immutable now in C#? A variable? No. A property, yes, by using the init property. But that's the compiler doing that. But the actual variable itself, effectively, the immutable var or something like that, you don't really do. You actually do this instead. If that's what you want, or something to that effect. Tuples are not dead. That's actually a tuple right there under the hood. Mr. JT. Const won't work with ref type. Good to know. What else? I'm just looking backwards through the thing.
There's a question. Can you apply attributes to records?
Can you apply attributes to records? Yes, absolutely. Serializable. For example, no problem at all. Oh, that's the class, idiot. I'm talking to myself again. Pop that there. For reference, I should reference classes, records, so forth. One of the things that is worth paying attention to is C# 9 has a whole bunch of these things that are here. So this is in the Roslyn language feature status page. But each of these has behind them a set of proposals. So on the .NET C# GitHub repo, there's actually a page with all the proposals in it. And for example, records is sitting in here. And if I jump into this one, it's actually got a bit of a spec of what's in here. So you can see the record declaration has attributes, class modifiers. You can do partial records. And then you've got your parameter list and a base record for your inheritance, and then the actual record body. And you can see the record body is your typical declarations or just a semicolon. The base is going to be your interfaces and class arguments and all those sort of things. So it's defined in public. You can jump through, see a bunch of these things. This is the equality contract, for example, that I was mentioning before in terms of comparisons. You get hash code. You've got a whole bunch of things under the hood, copy and clone, constructors, deconstruct. The with expression is defined here, how that works. all that. So that's really cool to pay attention to, as well as that null arg checking one that I mentioned. I think it's this one. Yeah, so you can see it's basically saying void m string whatever gets translated to if is null, throw argument null exception, etc., etc. The status of that one, again, I come back into the Roslyn list and can look through this to find out where some of this stuff is up to and whether it's been merged into what particular build. So it's cool. There's a whole bunch of other things as well, pattern matching improvements, again, trying to make C# more like F#. But I think that's probably a good run through given the time and the fact that we are half an hour over because James talked too much and so did I. And my pizza's getting cold.
Did you want to show your screen again, or how did things go?
Yes, things did in fact install.
Richard
Took
had to
6 minutes.
install to finish.
I need pizza.
Okay, so I've got my screen here. I've got the thing ready to go. We installed Ruby. And if I go through and have a look, what do you know? There are no COVID cases in my postcode, which is awesome. So I am super safe to go outside.
Is that because Western Australia is not in New South Wales, though?
Yeah, I was going to point that one out.
However, if I have a look.
You go and buy more RAM.
I'm not sure. I don't know. There was talk about how supposedly like the Surface laptops, you can replace stuff inside them now, but I thought it wasn't RAM. You can just replace the hard drives and you still have to do it through an authorized reseller, and it's kind of just if it breaks. Yeah.
Right. Well, I'm glad to see Richard has got a real pizza for the user group feel. Between them, we've got beers and pizzas, so
it's just like a normal Tuesday. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And just like the normal user group, the pizza's pretty much cold now. So great.
Yeah.
So am I doing this wrong because I don't have a pizza then?
I think we covered that last time.
Yeah, I think I'm doing meet-up food very wrong then. I have a salad with halloumi and chorizo and sweet potato. So, but I'm happy to stick with that.
You're probably higher per person than our
Do we have a giveaway, by the way, now?
Yeah, Aaron, giveaways.
I pasted questions that I came up with in the chat. I was leaving it to James because he's the one that actually has to dish out the licenses to pick from the 5 odd questions I came up with.
Oh wow! Okay.
I can read them out if you want, because that's what everyone's here for. They're waiting.
Right. Sounds good.
That's why people are still sticking around.
Wait, how many things do we got to give away?
2 licenses.
Okay, we'll do one question from James's talks and one from Amy's, because I didn't write any questions from Richard's. I was too busy getting stuck into the code. So, what do we call packages in Rust? And I hope James actually knows this because I don't. I'm just asking the question.
We got crates. Yes, that sounds good. All right, but we haven't given you a license before, have we?
Anyway. Actually, you the answer to that one. I learned that this week.
Excellent. Right. Woo.
That's good. Well, that was too easy. So Netrad, send a meetup message to me, and I'll send you the license with your email address in it.
Okay, and James can answer that question.
I think you can't get both licenses in the one alt.net, but if you come back next month, another license. So next, I think you got your quota for this alt.net.
Okay. So here's hopefully a slightly trickier one than that first question. Yeah. What sort of server do you need to run to use a GUI application from WSL? 1 or 2, I don't care. Ooh.
Dum, 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 dum.
See, I'm not entirely sure I'd be able to
With the
answer it.
That's right, you're out. So, you know.
Yeah, you can't answer again. Otherwise, I mean, that is technically correct.
I think you stumped them, Aaron.
Ooh.
Dum, 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 dum.
Okay, we'll give it 1 more minute. See if anyone wants to come up with. Otherwise, I'll fall back to another question.
Yeah, because I'm not sure I actually went through that because I don't really understand that. I followed a blog post that said do this. I followed the steps and it worked.
This funny X, maybe, right?
Stack Overflow based development.
Whoa.
Yes.
The answer, I think.
Oh,
that was
yep.
the answer. Is that
Yes, I
right?
was just about to go to the next question, but Hossam gets in there with the steal.
Oh, well
Yes.
done.
It is an X server.
Very good. And yeah,
Which
so
was teased at Build. They are going to be putting that in the box with WSL2 at some point in the future. That was demoed at Build. I haven't leaked anything, I don't think. Whoops.
Yes.
Shit. It's that NDAs again.
No, it was demoed at Build.
Yeah.
Gee, if that's an NDA, I hope that wasn't under NDA because the renewal date's tomorrow. I don't want them to take my MVP away from me.
You didn't break anything. It was Aaron.
so,
he just loses his job.
Yeah, it's fine.
Oh, that's good. No, because I want
That's
Aaron's
good.
job. We've been trying to work out what we can do about it.
So you can run an X server against WSL 1 or 2. It doesn't matter. It's a forwarding protocol over TCP, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can run an X server from a Docker container. So you can run GUI applications in Docker containers. Why do I know that?
Imagine if
Because I've
you'd
done
written a
that.
blog post around that.
Yeah.
you can run it remote as well from a server elsewhere. All right, maybe that's a wrap then. Let's.
Yep.
We've got nothing more to give away. So
Other than bad jokes and our love.
Yeah. Dignity.
And there's no more pizza, and Aaron's drunk all the beer, so.
that's right. Sounds like
There's a little bit, but you know.
well, thank you everyone for watching, and we'll be back next month with some exciting talks we'll work out between now and then.
We're always open for ideas. What can we say?
Sorry, I mean, volunteer, please. If you'd like to give a talk, you can see how much fun it is. So hit us up on Meetup or whatever method you want, Twitter, etc. And we're very happy to have you all volunteer. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone, for hanging around for a little bit longer. Enjoy your evenings.
Enjoy
This
the
is where
West
we
Wing
go. We
marathons.
out and drop the mic, and we're good.
We're done.